Welcome to dojo.live, the place where top minds in travel and hospitality check in to share insights and breakthroughs shaping the industry. Brought to you by Encora, your trusted partner for AI, cloud, and data-driven innovation. Enjoy your stay. Hello and welcome to another episode of Encora's Dojo Live, where we have candid conversations with industry leaders tackling the biggest technology challenges in travel and hospitality. I'm your host, Kim Lantis, and we're diving into episode number 3 today of our series, Unlocking Revenue Insights from Hospitality's RMS Leaders. Today, we're going to be discussing winning group business strategies and rethinking RFPs and instant booking for maximum revenue. Of course, I'm not doing it alone. Here to help me is my co-host, America Guerrero.
Hello, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here. Hello, Kristi.
Hello. And yes, leading with her insights on the topic is Kristi White, VP of Reporting and Data Analytics at Groups360. Kristi, thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited about this.
I'm super excited too. I think we're gonna have a lot of fun if our pre-show conversation were any indicator here.
You just never know what's going to come out of my mouth. They should have warned you about this.
Alan Young yesterday did warn me. Actually, I'm just kidding.
He would 100% know firsthand. So yeah.
I love it. But to get us started, Kristi, for those who don't know you, if you could please share a bit about your background, what brought you into travel hospitality, and of course, Groups360, who you are with. What are your key challenges that you're solving?
Yeah, so I'm a 30-plus year hospitality veteran. I spent the first 17 years of my career in hotels, working in operations, sales and marketing, and revenue management. And then I moved to the dark side of the world, aka vendor, to help hotels utilize distribution to drive more revenue. And for me, Groups360 is an evolution of that passion for revenue and distribution. Groups360 is at the forefront of expanding our definition of distribution as we push group business into the self-service format of distribution. And much like the early 2000s, when operators were saying no one will ever book on the interwebs, we have operators and sellers saying no one will ever book group online. And just like in the early 2000s, they're wrong. People will, and they are, and that's our next evolution. And that's what I'm truly passionate about, is helping hotels use that distribution to better service their top line and their bottom line revenues. And that's me. And I got into the business. I told you guys in this pre-show, but I'll tell this now. I got into the business because I didn't want to ask I have a degree in political science, meant to go to law school. I did not want to have to ask my parents for beer money when I was in college. A friend of mine got me a job at a hotel so that I would have said beer money, and I never left. 37 years later. Yes, I started when I was 12. There's a little under drinking there.
And with so many conventions and conferences in the industry, you never have to spend any more beer money because it's completely covered everywhere you go.
100%. Or you go work at big full service hotels, and there's always some kind of cocktail thing that you can pop into and grab a quick drink.
All right. Kristi knows where it's at. All right. So we're going to be talking about the RFP, request for proposal, primarily in today's show. And so that leads sort of to the first question. Kristi, from your perspective, how successful are hotels today in managing RFPs? And I'm interested in knowing what the numbers kind of tell us about response, conversion rates, and is there any kind of breakdowns happening? What's going on?
Yeah. So the politic answer would be we do a fair to middling job in responding to RFPs. My 3 cocktails later answer would be not well at all. The fact is our industry has a lower than average response rate to RFPs at about 45% compared to other industries where that number hovers somewhere around 67%. So think about that. For every 100 RFPs that we receive, we only respond to 45 of them. So if you think about this in the sense of the funnel that we always traditionally think about with sales, we put 100 in, 50 of them get somewhere. And here's where it gets worse. It's when you compare close rates. Outside the hospitality industry, close rates are between 40 and 50%. in the hospitality industry, it's 5 to 7%. So we limit our funnel by only responding to 45 out of every 100 we receive. And then we aren't especially effective at closing those that we do bother to respond to. So I would say in vino veritas, we don't do it well after all. The breakdown is because we still place priority on speed and not quality. This results in an inordinate number of declines because it's the fastest possible response. So we're only responding to 45 out of 100. And if we decline half of them, we've limited that funnel even more. And each cut at the top of the funnel diminishes our returns at the bottom. So we don't do an especially good job, and the numbers hold that out.
Interesting. When you say speed over quality, is that always from like the vendor side? Is it also from the customer side?
It's from the vendor side. It's from the hotels functionally responding. And I kind of want to qualify that, because there's a time for speed. There's a time where you look at that RFP, you do a quick evaluation of it, and it's it's a one-time piece of business. You've got the availability, and all you're going to respond is rates, dates, and space. There is functionally nothing wrong with a speedy reply. But too often what ends up happening is you see that and you're like, I don't really want that piece of business, or that rate that the customer is requesting is lower than what we do. So our knee-jerk reaction is we just hit that decline button and say, nope, never mind. As opposed to, or we're actually functionally sold out on the dates that they're requesting, as opposed to taking those 2 extra seconds and saying, I can't honor that rate. This is the rate that I can offer, but here are 2 alternate dates where I could get closer to your rate. Because guess what? They may be flexible on their dates. They may be flexible on their date pattern. But if you just decline, that is a hard no, and they walk away. And you don't functionally know, was this a one-time piece of business? You do, with some, like it's a wedding. Well, Susie's not getting married at your hotel a second time. At least I hope not. Although I do know someone who did get married at the same place twice to 2 different people. That's a story for a different day. But
that's the 4 cocktails later.
That's the 4 cocktail story. But traditionally, Susie's not coming back a second time. So you can make those things. But if you hit that decline button, you've turned that customer down. Let's say that you hit the decline button and it is someone, and this was one piece of business, but they have 14 other pieces of business. You decline them once or twice and they're just going to stop coming back to the well. So we have to figure out a better way of where we balance that piece between speed and thoughtfulness in the way that we functionally reply.
That's very interesting. I'm thinking about what are the strategies that can help hotels respond faster while protecting profitability. I mean, what you said about the speed, what are the strategies out there?
It kind of varies dependent upon the type of hotel it is. So if we're talking at the hotel level, there's going to be maybe you have a sole person and that's all they do is weed through the RFPs, and that maybe it's a beginner person. It's someone that's just entry into sell, and you give them fairly robust guidelines of what gets the quick rates, dates, and space, what gets pushed onto a seller to go through, and what they do decline or don't decline. I will say this, and I'm going to say it at least 4 times during our time together today. I am of the mind that you never, ever, and let me repeat this for the hard-headed in the room, ever decline an RFP. Always respond with some type of rate, even if it's not the rate that you think they're looking for, and at least a couple of dates that you can give them others. It's not that difficult. We've automated all of this. There are tools out there that allow you to get to a group rate quickly. We've streamlined that process from a revenue management perspective so much that it shouldn't take more than 5 or 6 minutes to do that. And it's a templated form that you send the RFP back in and say, for the date in question, this is the rate that I have. Sorry, I can't get close to the rate you're requesting, but here are 2 other dates that I'm more in line with. And then from a size perspective, little Susie's wedding, having a green person responding to that with dates, rates, and space, there's nothing wrong with that. Things that are bigger, that 100 rooms on peak, bigger pieces of business, that goes off to a seller to spend a little bit more time crafting a very thoughtful response. If you're a management company and you've got 50 or 60 hotels that you're dealing with, it might be worth having a small group of people that manage all of the RFPs inbound for your for all of your hotels, not just on property. And then if you're a brand, they already have that. They have lead catchers that go in that, but they're probably only doing that for qualified accounts. So think big national accounts that have defined sellers at the chain level that are managing that. So there are lots of different ways to do that. And, that's something that we need to think about. And I've actually got some takeaways at the end that we're going to talk about that may get us there, America, just a little bit more. But that gives you a highlight for it. Little teaser.
Yeah, for sure. What would you say to those vendors, those hotels are saying, well, I decline right now, but I respond later? Like,
Yeah,
where does that fall in?
So here's the thing. Planners are as busy as we are, and they're doing 47 different things. If they have taken the time to go into a consolidated platform like Groups360 to send out the RFP, that is their preferred initial starting point. That's where they want to communicate with you. So do them the service of doing the initial communication through there, because if you decline it through there, chances are they're just moving on to the next hotel. And when you reach out offline, they're going to ignore you. I've had planners tell me that the minute you decline it in the system, you sort of cease to exist for the purpose of that piece of business. So at least do the courtesy of responding inside the platform with your rates. Even if you're offering a rate that they're not interested in or alternate dates, start there, then move that conversation offline if they want to move forward. But the minute you hit decline in there, you kind of cease to exist for them.
So it's the beauty of both pieces, the speed and the quality. You come in with the speed, and then you're able to perfect it
absolutely
later on, but you've bought yourself time and you've given that really great first impression.
Correct, because you gave them something they need, and they look at it and they go, hey, you know what, that is 100% in our wheelhouse. Or I actually didn't, because I just saw this recently where someone responded and they're like, that's homecoming weekend. It was a Texas A&M major university homecoming weekend for Texas A&M. And they responded and said, we can't honor the rate that you're requesting because it's the Texas A&M homecoming weekend. This is the rate that I can offer. And that rate, by the way, was like 3 times what the customer was asking for. I don't know how that worked out, but now the customer knows, oh, maybe this isn't a weekend that I want to be in College Station, Texas. Maybe I need to look somewhere else or look at alternate dates. You're actually helping to educate that particular customer. And there's no planner that's not going to be happy if you're educating them on why rates might be higher than they're anticipating or availability might be limited. You may actually be doing them a favor, and they're going to remember the person that did them that favor.
You're on mute, Kim.
Thank you. Got to happen once in a while. I was just going to say, in that example, it's really amazing because that answer of can't do it because this is the reason is probably the answer they're going to be getting, or no answer from other places they're trying for the same exact reason.
Yep.
So if you're the one who's honest, upfront, we appreciate that. Awesome. Now, I know, America, you've got a question coming right down the pipeline for Kristi. But before we get there, I wanted to let you know, Kristi, that Corey Falter is
by the way, hey, Corey.
Loves this. Yeah, he always loves learning from you. Thank you, Corey. Amazing.
He's also one of my favorite people. We talked about Alan Young earlier, and Corey ranks right up there with him. He's amazing.
I will send you a LinkedIn Connect request, Corey. I want you to be part of the network. Yeah. Let's continue the conversation. Yes. So for hotels hesitant to embrace self-service group booking tools, what kind of data or case studies challenge the fear that instant booking might cannibalize high-value sales?
Well, so right now that business is somewhat gated because you typically can't book a group piece of business that's more than 25 rooms on peak. So automatically, we're not cannibalizing your big pieces of business because physically there are limits that functionally go with that. So that 100 room per night event isn't going to book online, but that 20 room wedding or small corporate event can, and they are booking online. And let's expand that to talk about those Smurf one-off pieces of business. Why would you want your sellers spending time on those? Your hotels should embrace this technology, build marketing efforts, sales plays, and lean into it. currently the average booking, instant booking, is 28 room nights. So I'm going to pose that question to all the hoteliers that might be online. How many of your RFPs are on the smaller side and could be resourced to self-service bookings, thus freeing up your sellers to respond more thoughtfully to those larger RFPs and get out and hunt for new business? We actually worked with a couple of hotels in Wilmington, North Carolina, not Wilmington, Delaware, and they had actually stopped booking on site any wedding business unless it also had meeting space attached to it. So if they were booking the reception at the hotel, then their sellers handled it. But if it was just a room block for little Susie's wedding, and I pick on little Susie a lot, she's a great gal, but I pick on her all the time. They had built marketing paraphernalia. They had links to the websites, QR codes for when they went to wedding shows, and it specifically said, here, come to this website. You're always going to get the best available rate for your wedding, and you can do everything online. You don't even have to talk to a person. At one point, they were our number one booker across the entire globe in instant bookings, and it was all wedding business. It was hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue, and they never had to have a seller touch it. They had a process that once it books, that the person got an email saying, welcome to our hotel. Here's important information for your guest, went to them instantly, and they provided them amazing service after the point of sale, but the seller never functionally had to be involved in it. And it was booking hundreds of thousands of dollars. It still does. We've had other customers that have just caught up with them, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and their sellers never had to lay a hand on it. That freed their sellers up to go look at bigger pieces of business, not only from an RFP perspective and doing those thoughtful RFPs, but also freeing them up to go sell, like hunt for new business as well.
Yeah, that's the proactive versus the reactive piece that we're leaning into. You mentioned securing the room blocks, and I think Susie's wedding is a really good example, I think, of potentially additional revenue potential that exists in group businesses. How else, might hotels be able to focus when it comes to the total revenue management piece?
So that's, that to me, that's a very specific thing because it's dependent upon the hotel functionally having those functional opportunities. What kind of restaurant do they have? Do they have a bar? Do they have spa services, golf, all of those things? So, that's going to be a very unique thing that comes from each thing. But using a limited service, if they've got a small meeting room, reaching out after the fact to say, we have a small meeting room that you could book so that your family could have breakfast in there the next day. Having those opportunities to add those on, making sure that the little Susie knows all of the other amenities that are available at the hotel. And it may even be that you want to throw a small discount on there for spa services or, in the bar, because they're going to finish that reception and there are going to be a few people that still want to keep the party going and offer up the services of the bar. And if they're mention your wedding party, and you'll get a 5% discount or whatever that functionally looks like, to try to keep as much of that revenue in-house as functionally possible. But not all hotels are going to have those opportunities, but those possibilities exist. And it doesn't change how we upsell a normal group. The only thing that changes is the point of entry. That's literally the only thing that changes.
And to be clear, with this point of entry, in terms of, places like Groups360 with the instant and automated booking, they can book all of that, not just the room blocks. All of that is bookable right now.
Yeah, on the meeting space, the hotels control how much meeting space can be booked. So chances are they're not going to have their ballroom open for a reception to book, but you can actually put that in the request as well. But you can book those guest rooms with no problems. But smaller meeting rooms, if you wanted to just book that small meeting room to have breakfast, so there was a place for all of your people to be able to go and collectively have the continental breakfast in there, that functionally can all be booked online. Yeah.
Wow.
Or even corporate events. You've got someone that's planning a corporate event and it's 15 or 20 people and they're going to need 10 or 15 guest rooms. All of that can be done online. And a lot of companies didn't bring back professional meeting planners after COVID. This is someone, I like to call it's their side hustle. It's what they do when they're not doing their real job, but they're at their real job, and they're planning those smaller meetings, a plant meeting or something along those lines. They're not professionals. They're doing this when they have 15 minutes of spare time, and if they can get online and do it and not have to talk to someone, 100% going to do that. I'll ask this of you guys. When's the last time you went to do something and you had to call a place and you got frustrated because you had to pick up the phone, and there was another place that you could do everything online, and you're like, I'm gonna go to that other place because I don't have to talk to anybody.
Absolutely.
It is.
And when it's the side
and
thing, we're
the
also
younger
talking
generation
about
is worse about it. My son would rather take a beating than to actually have to talk to someone on the phone, and that includes his mother and father.
and we're
Yeah.
talking about the odd hours too. When we
Yes.
are doing these types of things, it's before we head off to work or right
Yeah,
before
well, I
bed.
mean, yes and no. I did the analysis just recently, and I was assuming that a lot of these instant bookings were occurring outside of traditional business hours. And come to find out, they're not. 70% of them are happening between the hours of 9 to 5. And that's one of the pushback that we get from hotels is that, oh, well, they won't book because my people are working. They are booking when your people are working. So it's, I like to say this, people want what they want when they want it. And sometimes they don't want to wait for your people to to answer the phone or respond to an email or respond to a voicemail or text or smoke signal or whatever way you're using to communicate. They get online, the rate is what they wanted to pay, and they're willing, I can do this and mark this off my, everybody's got a to-do list. If I can get that and mark off my to-do list, way to go.
Amazing.
And yes, for corporate events, Susie's events, talking about AI, changing a little bit the subject, AI and automation are changing revenue management across the industry. And this is something that we have heard a lot. So how are they influencing pricing, availability, and overall group booking strategy?
Yeah. So I will be joining the witness relocation program shortly after this. So, don't go to my LinkedIn profile because I'm not going to exist anymore. What we've seen is rates coming via instant booking are often higher than what we see from RFPs because the rates quoted from the revenue management systems are agnostic to who or what the group is. The revenue management system factors in demand, forecast, and prevailing rates, and it doesn't have a dog in the hunt. Additionally, it generates rates as long as inventory is available because it manages to overall profitability. When sellers get involved, personalities get involved, which often results in lower rates or turn down business because overall top line revenue, take a breath, so that results in lower rates, turn down business, but overall lower top line revenues, which leads to less bottom line. And we see it too frequently where the rate that was available at the time the customer made the inquiry was $20, $30, sometimes $40 higher than the rate that actually gets proposed from the RFP from the seller. And some of that is you get into a great conversation when you're like, oh, I like this person, I want to give them a discount. Some of it could be that you get into it and come to find out they have a corporate rate and it's the corporate rate that was quoted back. But that doesn't happen when it's just, for the lack of a better way to do it, the machine doing the quote, because they don't have that dog in the hunt. There's no personality functionally involved. So overall, I would say that those instant bookings tend to drive higher rates for hotels because the AI of revenue management is doing such an amazing job with the revenue management process. It's when the human element comes in that things go a little squirrely.
That's something that would never have occurred to me. And I think that's a really interesting perspective. And particularly when you're talking about these smaller events that you can book anyway, stop leaving the money on the table. And then the money that you're bringing in can actually be a little higher than if you would have managed it a different way. Amazing. We're coming to the final few minutes of the show already. If you can believe it or not, this has been very fun. How many cocktails in are we now? 5? I
think we're at 4. But so as we're coming to this, I want to give some people some takeaways. So can I kind of take these minutes and do this, because I do have some good takeaways, because I got some hard questions I want answers to, and I want you guys to go home or get your to-do list, get your electronic pad, whatever you take notes on, and we're about to get into some stuff. So
All right.
now that the planners, both professional and non-professional, have discovered this ability to book smaller meetings instantly, they're embracing this technology. But hotels we need to lean into the process within the RFP process and look into your own lead process and see where there are opportunities to drive consumers into instant booking. There's specific segments where there's opportunity at the hotel. We talked about that. Weddings without space is a prime example. Sports groups, like little Susie's son's soccer team. Whether it's by an RFP or direct inquiry, pushing your lead catchers or sellers into a redirect to instant booking, this is the process. But more importantly, we must look at how we incent sellers. So I'm challenging all of you above property people, the ones that set those incentive programs. Not all pieces of business are created equally, and they shouldn't be incented equally. If the seller isn't as rewarded for smaller pieces of business that could be direct booked, they will natively turn their attention to larger pieces of business. In essence, sellers go where the money is. So don't incent for little Susie's wedding at the same level that you incent for Georgia Pacific's annual sales kickoff. So that leads to a way we have to restructure how we manage and process RFPs. So here's those hard questions for you hoteliers, whether it's above property or below property. When's the last time you reviewed your RFP strategy? Was it this year, last year, when dinosaurs roamed the earth? Who handles those RFPs? Are you using a clearinghouse, individual salespeople, lead catcher? America asked that amazing question right at the top of the call about that. What does that process look like at your hotels, chain, brand, whatever? Do you have time requirements for response? And do they vary based upon the size of event? Or do you just say, everything needs to be done within 3 hours? Because here's the secret fact. It doesn't matter. Most pieces of business that are won, the response time between when it was sent and when it was responded to is 1 day and 13 hours. Those are the ones that get won. Even more importantly, those hotels that are winning 90%, remember I said it's 5 to 7% on average, those winning 90%, their average response time from point of send to when they respond to the RFP is just over 2 days. So it's not the fast turtle that's getting this one. It's that slow little rabbit. And yes, I know I mixed metaphors there. Do you always include alternate dates in your response? If you don't, you need to be doing that, and you need to get with your team and make sure they're doing it. What's the process for declining? This one's very important. And I would argue, as I said earlier, you should never, ever, ever, and let me repeat that, ever decline an RFP. Throw a rate out with at least 2 alternate dates. A decline is a hard no. A rate, even if it's not in the budget, is a conversation starter. And that's what this should be about. What's the follow-up process to close RFPs? Do you just send out that stuff and hope they give it to you? Is there a defined process? And more importantly, are your people following it? Can you train that through your CRM and see what that looks like? What's the follow-up process for lost business? When you get the nope, you didn't win that piece of business, and you have a good gut feeling that this is a repeat piece of business, how does that go into your funnel? What's the follow-up process for repeat business from an RFP? So you got the RFP, in talking to them, you discover they do this all the time. This is a 3 or 4 times. How do you get that into your pipeline so that you're following up on it? Or do you just wait till next year when that RFP comes out and now you're competing against 12 hotels? These are the hard things that we have to do, and we have to be able to track it, because if you can't track it, you can't measure it. So those are my hard questions you need to ask yourselves and get answers for. Each hotel is going to be different, and it should evolve. RFPs are here to stay, and how we manage them should be flexible and evolving regularly. Those were my takeaways. Got through them.
Great. All right. I do have a question following that up. I think they're really great questions. But when hotels are asking themselves those questions, who do you think should be involved in that conversation?
I think that needs to be across the board. If you're a management company, I think the management company should maybe start the framework for that, but then bring in their super users from their hotels. Bring in those guys that are closing everything. Bring in those guys that don't close a whole lot, and have them look at that process and say, yep, do that, do that, do that, do that. Don't do that. I do these 4 other things instead. So it becomes a learning and evolving thing, because by the time you make it to above property, you've been doing this for a hot minute. and you haven't been at the property level, and things have changed. And I've written articles about this. I've talked about this. It's not a leadership gap. We have great leaders. It's just that our leaders are so far removed from the day-to-day piece of it that we've forgotten the headache that goes into that. So get that feedback, make that a bi-directional feedback on how that RFP things, and then it should functionally be, and I'm going to drop those things in here so people can grab them. Hang on, I'm just going to do that while I'm thinking about it. Is we functionally, it's got to be a couple of times a year that you functionally look at this and let people know that we're updating it, that we're looking at it, and let that be a growing, living document, not just something that we look at once and then, dinosaurs roam the earth for the rest of time and we don't do anything with it.
You're on mute, Kim. We can't hear you. I know you're inspired.
Dang it. That's the sixth cocktail's fault. All right. All right. Corey actually does have a follow. He's still with us, hey Corey. He's wondering, every other industry recognizes we're moving to a DIY, do-it-yourself sales process. Why doesn't hospitality leaders, or why don't hospitality leaders see this change even when you drop receipts?
It's a great question, Corey, and it comes down to the incentive component of it. We incent all pieces of business equally. So you've got sellers who are going, well, I'll never make my goals, my booking goals, if I'm not booking little Susie's wedding. And guess what? Little Susie's wedding is stupid easy to book. You give her the rate that she wants, and if she likes the hotel, then by gosh, she's gonna book it. So it's really easy to close a lot of little stuff and build up those functional numbers. If you make it where they just either don't get incented on those pieces of business, or they get incented at a lesser amount, that's going to natively change. You have to change the behavior before you get into that. And I would argue, because Corey's just come up with another question, but would commission-free business be attractive to leaders? Yes and no. The hospitality industry is hideously unincented. You go work anywhere else, and the pay and what you get paid and incented on is so much higher, which is why we bleed out good salespeople to other industries. We've got to go back and look at it. And I worked for, she will go down as one of my top 5 worst bosses ever. She shall remain nameless, but she is one of my worst bosses, like top 3 worst bosses ever.
Till the 7th cocktail.
7th cocktail. That's afterwards. But one thing she said to me when I moved into a regional role is, and you would think that regionals make more than property level people. She goes, but I had big behemoth properties that were in my portfolio. And she said, you're going to have sellers that are making more money than you. And that's okay. And I was like, well, first off, I was a seller, and I was probably one of those sellers that I know I was making more money than I make now because I was bonused on what I sold. We don't know. It is anathema to this industry that we would be paying sellers based upon what they're functionally booking versus a guaranteed salary. And I'm of the mind that we need to revamp that to say we're going to pay them less, but we're going to give them a lot more upside on closing that business and bringing that business. And I'm not talking about signature on a contract here, my friends. I'm talking about live pickup from a group. So they're realizing most of their bonus after groups come and go. There is so much value in that, and we will be able to attract a much higher caliber of salespeople if we move to that. Right now, we're giving them these things, and we treat every piece of business equally. And I think even if you treat every piece of business equally, but they're being incented on the pickup of it, it incents you to go find that 1,000-room piece of business. And I don't care about little Susie's wedding because I only make a couple of $100 on that. But over here, I can make $5,000 on this. I'm going over here every single time.
Absolutely.
Corey,
absolutely.
did that answer your question, my love?
All right. He can chime in, and if he wants to ask another question, we're here all for it. In the meanwhile, looking ahead, right? He said beautiful. All right. What numbers or trends signal where group business and RFP management are headed in the next few years? So your predictions for the future, what should hotels start doing today to prepare for that?
Yeah, so I think they need to lean into the instant booking. This is not a trend. This is not something that's going away. I liken it to the early 2000s, and I was working in hotels at that time, and the interwebs were just sort of a thing. And I remember when booking engines came out and having people sitting in a room with leaders going, no one's ever going to book a hotel room online. It's never going to happen. And then Expedia came along and proved us all wrong. And it took us years to claw back that ownership of that piece and to get those costs down. We're at the beginning of it. This is that tipping point moment. And we're actually seeing that, where we're seeing the adoption of it double and triple every single year. Much faster than we actually saw that contribution that grew when the initial Expedias and those guys came into the place. And I worked at TravelClick at the time. I know those numbers. We're seeing that tipping point already. So those hotels that lean into this and say, okay, we're going to look at all of our one-time piece of business and we're going to try to push that into instant booking as much as humanly possible. We're going to make sure those things happen. We're going to get rid of if they go online, they get a higher rate than if they talk to our sellers, because we're going to get some parity on that. I think that's going to be our last bastion of rate parity, is the gap between what a buyer could get online versus what they can get from talking to a salesperson. Let's do away with all of that and get that to a parity perspective. And then we're going to see people leaning into it. And then it's going to give us all that time back so that we functionally can spend more time being thoughtful on those valuable RFPs that are large enough to feed our hotel year round.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you very much, Kristi, for your time today. It's a wrap on this episode of Dojo Live. Yay! Thank you again for sharing your tips on how hotels can shift from the reactive RFP to the proactive RFP and revenue capture via automation and instant booking. Before we go, if our audience wants to know more about you and get a hold of you or Groups360, how can they go about doing that?
So groups360.com, there's our website right there. If you want to reach out to me personally, you can do it on LinkedIn, or you can send me an email at groups360. So it's kristi.white@groups360.com. It was a little bit harder to say than I thought it was going to be. Anyone who knows me well, I'm going to respond fairly quickly on both of those different sites, and always open to a lively conversation or email from you. Tell me I'm crazy, tell me I'm not crazy, ask for advice. Happy to do any of that.
I love it. I love it. Fantastic. We would also like to thank our sponsor, Ancora, for making these conversations possible. As a reminder, Ancora partners with leading travel and hospitality companies to accelerate innovation through world-class engineering solutions. And of course, if you enjoyed our conversation today, like Corey did, be sure to follow us at dojo.live. You can catch all of our past shows at the website dojo.live, and of course, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and elsewhere. About what's next, we're going to be continuing our revenue series next week with 3 more amazing shows. Kicking off on Tuesday will be Bionics with Alex Barrows, followed up by Tess McGoldrick of Revenue Analytics, and wrapping up with Nikhil Shah of Cloudbeds. So we'll see you at 10 o'clock a.m. Pacific next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. As always, until then, stay curious, stay innovative, and bye for now.
And be sure to tell Tess hi for me.
All right. You can come on in and do it yourself. I love it. Thank you.